Hello, I'm Kevin Kawula, and we're in Rock County, Wisconsin, town of Spring Valley, western Rock County, Wisconsin. And today we're going to make a grapevine wreath. But first, we have to forage up our material so we have enough to make a nice big wreath like this. And I like new material that grows this year, but we can also use older, thicker vines. And if you can see in the cedar tree behind me, there are some pale green leaves. That's the grapevine in fall. It's October 27th. We're going to go start collecting our grapevines. Okay, so you can see that I'm dressed to be out here. And I've got my gloves on. I'm going to need my snips. And this is the grapevine here. But since we want it as long as we can get it, before I start pulling it out, I'm going to find the bottom. I'm going to find the bottom and pull from there. Grapevines usually have more than one vine on them. They can grow like a spider until they find a vertical and then they go up. So I found the base. I've got 3, 4 vines, and I'm going to pull them back this way. This is a good way to keep your trees from getting taken down by grapevines. You're saying, how do the grapevines get there? Birds. Birds eat the grapes and birds deposit when they take off from the branches. So I've got a handful already, but I'm going to need more. I keep looking around. Okay, I've gone through the trees and the shrubs and along the ground behind me. I've been able to gather up enough grapevine that we can assemble our wreath. And what we're going to do now is get on out of the wind and go into one of our sheds and assemble our wreath. Okay, so now we're inside the shed. And we've got our model wreath here. And I'm going to show you how to do the simple, basic grapevine wreath wrap, and then wrap it with a grapevine again. This will hold it together, but I'm also going to recommend string because over time, these things, the wreaths dry and things keep tending to pop out. And so you'll have to adjust it, and the string's going to help keep everything in place. All right, so I've got the model wreath here. I'm going to leave you right here. I've got my first strand. I walk my bundles over. In there, trying to keep them separated so that they didn't all tangle on the way over. And if I was out in the field, I could assemble this out in the field, but it's so windy, we're coming inside. All right, so I've got my model wreath. And if I don't have my model wreath, I can still just turn this as best I can. And then the idea is it's a simple field wrap. And then normally we just take that and take it over to where we're going to dispose of it because we didn't want it growing any trees, but now we're going to make it into a wreath. So that one's set there, and I've just placed it on top because, as it turns out, you can build a wreath on top of each other. You don't have to do it in some intricate pattern. It's more, I'll say it's more like building a nest than weaving a basket. So I've got my next bundle of grapevines. At the far edge, bring my hands around to the far edge. I know I've got enough distance. Now taking the big end, I can tuck it on the inside and things will start to knit together. I'm just doing a wrap that follows the natural tendency of the grapevine. Now, while I'm in the middle of the process of putting the wreath together, if I need bulk, I can add in some of these awkward pieces, short pieces. Anybody who's not going to be a very good wreath piece, I can use in the middle as filler. And I sort of walk them along and spring load them on the inside of the wreath I'm already making. Take the model out so it doesn't get too confusing. So I'm taking my odd pieces, wrapping them on the inside of the wreath. They're spring loaded on the inside now. They're pushing out. I've got my next bundle for the top. Grabbing the ends, following the arc of the wreath. I can plug them in there. There's a bundle. I'm starting to approach the volume of the model wreath, so I'm going to start looking for a wrapping piece. Wrapping piece is a nice straight piece that will help me to hold the wreath together. I might take 1, 2, or 3 pieces. Okay, I think I found a good wrapping vine here. But what I want to do, I was thinking about when I was looking for the wrapping vines, that this is going to shrink and dry down, so I'm going to want to add a little bit more bulk before I wrap up the wreath. Add a little more bulk so that after it dries, it will shrink a little bit. These are fresh vines. Add a little bit more volume. I'm flipping the natural curve so it goes this way with the wreath around and it doesn't fight it. If it becomes problematic, I'll trim it with my pruner. And I'm going counter on this one to match its curve, and also that way I can balance my bottoms and my tops a little bit. Okay. I'm going to start the wrapping. I'm going to start the wrapping, and it's basically a whip stitch. And the vines are poking out. It's going to be okay because I can still tuck them in. If the vines are sticking out, I can still tuck them in later. I don't want to go when I wrap it too tight, so I compress this down. I'm going to keep mine a little bit open, and I want to keep my volume. Here's the end. I'm going to tuck that in here so that it stays, and then the next whip wrapping will go there. Start to do now is to pick up my stray vines, feed them back through. That one just snapped, but he's going into the inside as filler. Okay. Starting off where I left. And that's why you can see why string can you can do it off with string. I'll do this later. Here's my start. Here's my complete wrap around. I'm not liking that. This one, I can chuck on the inside here. Okay. getting very close. And now for the next few minutes, I can just sort of clean up and tuck in. And this is going to stay as a wreath. The idea is I can dress it up afterwards with ribbon and other things. Oddballs off. Anybody who's nice and workable, I can tuck in. If they're very short and won't tuck in, I'm going to trim them off. Okay, so we finished wrapping around with grapevine, and then I added one or two smaller ones just to hold it in the wreath shape. But what happens over time is while this model is holding together pretty well, but starting to lose a couple of the smaller branches or they're springing out. Sometimes on a bigger wreath, or if you use bigger material, they just keep tending to spring out like that. And so the string helps to keep everything in place. I'm using baling twine from a bale of straw. So if you have a bale of straw, there's 2 strings on there. And I was careful not to cut. But at the very end of the knot, so I got 2 tight ends. Then I granny knot, put together this side. And it should be enough to do one wrapping of the grapevine wreath. This is just going to help hold everything in place. My first job is to make sure I can get all the way around. I won't worry about spacing later. Not doing it too tight. Trying to hold everything in place. So now this is much more stable. When I tuck things in, even if they dry and want a spring, the string will hold them into place. If I want extra security, I can wrap the opposite way. All right, that is that with a string, a wreath, wild Wisconsin grapevine wreath with string. And then if that's not big enough, I can add more. And if that's not big enough, or if I want to say, cover my Christmas tree base or an outdoor container tree, I can add more. And if that's not enough, I can continue until I get something big enough and size enough, as the grapevines tend to hold themselves as a large container. What will happen over time is these will compress. So by the end of the winter, it'll be something more like this, and then next spring it'll be shorter still. I want to say thank you, Museum of Wisconsin Art, for setting up the Wisconsin Wild Grapevine Wreath project. Kevin Kawula in Rock County.